Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of the Discover Your Career Q&A session. I have a lot of different types of questions this week, some in response to the questions from last week, so that's great. Thank you again to everyone who joined and who watched throughout the week. It is growing and I'm impressed by that and happy that I'm hopefully able to provide answers to questions that everyone has on their minds to make their job search or their career development a little bit easier. So my week, I do like to kind of give a little weekly review of what's been going on. First of all, if you watched my first one, you'll remember how I started with how nervous I was. It's amazing how easier it is and how I'm not as nervous as I was coming into everything. So it is nice that is happening. It makes it a lot easier. My sister got married this past weekend, so that was very exciting. It was also very busy because we had family from out west and it was so great to see them, and we took them to Niagara Falls on Monday, so it was nice to get some extra time with them as well. I said a speech to my sister, which was a little nerve-wracking, but I wasn't as nervous as I think I would normally have been. I think doing these sort of lives and all of the live presentations that I've been doing this past year has really made it easier for public speaking, which is nice and which is great. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So like last week, I have divided the questions up into ones of a similar nature. The first question I wanted to address was the question that I missed last week, but that I needed to jump off on. So I wanted to really make sure I addressed that. So these first few questions are all about the offer process. So different things that maybe come up that you may need to chat about or are concerned about. So those are some of the questions. So the first one, I'm looking for a new job and I just found out that my sister, congratulations, is getting married in the winter, a destination wedding, and I'm in it. How do I broach the subject? So this is actually a very common thing. Weddings, vacations that have been booked already, like people have lives, that they live. And so an HR person or recruiter won't be alarmed. This is not something that they've never, or this is something that they have seen all the time. But I would recommend during the interview process not to necessarily bring it up unless they ask. So an agency recruiter or corporate recruiter may ask you, is there anything that you have planned that may impact, or do you have any vacations coming up? So they may ask that, and at that point, of course, you're going to bring it up and tell them. The best thing to do is to wait until you are at the offer stage and then tell them and ask to have the vacation pre-approved. That's the important thing, is especially if it's a wedding. Like you can't not go to the wedding. So if you ask for that pre-approval, having it in email from HR and ideally the hiring manager, then they can't sort of renege on that. But how I usually recommend to people when they have the situation to sort of broach it is to offer to take it unpaid. I know not ideal, but especially if it's within the first 3 months, because it's not the best thing to do to go on vacation in the first 3 months. It's okay if it's something like this, like no one on the team is gonna be like, oh my gosh, she just started just taking vacation, or he's already taking vacation. No one's gonna think that. So offering to take it unpaid is a sign of good faith. And then if they say, oh no, that's okay, we'll just do it paid, then even better. But you've done the good thing in offering to take it unpaid. Question number 2. It seems that each company wants different things before an offer. References, background checks. What does it all mean? Then I had a second question from someone else, but it kind of goes in line with this. What is the difference between references and employment verification? So each company does typically want different things. And honestly, even within a company, each position wants different things. It really depends on the role that you're in. So for example, if you are in a client-facing role or a role where you may even be going into someone's house, or you're working with children, obviously those background checks will be different. So than if you weren't in those sort of positions. So the first thing about references is that typically a company would ask for 2 to 3 references to previous supervisors and maybe one peer. And those are longer phone calls to question previous employers about your work experience, your work ethic, different work habits and behaviors. So do you match to this position? There is a key question that's asked at the end of every reference check, and that is, would you rehire this person? Honestly, though, references are on the decline. They aren't as popular as they used to be. Even companies don't even do them. Usually the background check company does it, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Employment verification, and only really large companies do this. A lot of the financial institutions do it. I think the government does it, but not a lot of companies do employment verification anymore. And that's where they will verify your positions in the last 5 years. And they're only checking, they're not asking about like how you were as an employee. They're asking about, did you work there? Why did you leave the job? And what was your role? And then the other sort of backgrounds that are typically done are criminal and credit checks. And this is depending on the role and the type of company, but be prepared to do that. And you may even need to state or to sign a document stating that you do not have a criminal record that you know of. If that's the case and you do have a criminal record, let them know and what it was for, okay? It's always best to be honest up front. Because in most cases it has no bearing on the job, so it doesn't have an impact. I interviewed with a company last week, and they sent over the offer yesterday. So I got this question this morning, so I really wanted to make sure I included it. I don't want to take the job, so what do I do? Decline the offer in a polite and professional manner. That is the easiest thing to do. You can come up with the reason. You can come up with a location reason. You want to be very careful though, because you don't want to be blacklisted. One thing, please do not ghost. Okay? This happens. I remember the name of every single candidate that ever ghosted me in some way. I know I presented a candidate to a hiring manager last year with one of my clients, and she said, you know what? I think I interviewed this person a year ago, and I wanted to bring them in for a second, but they just dropped off of the face of the earth. So I think I'm going to pass. So by ghosting, you can be blacklisted from that company forever, because it'll go in an applicant tracking system. It'll go in the file. But people also remember. Like, I remember everyone that's ever done this to me, and it's through the interview process or at an offer level, at the offer stage, where someone just disappears. You can't get them to pick up the phone. Sorry about that. Paused again. They just... There we go. Just disappear. And that is probably one of the most annoying things to happen. So I don't recommend doing it. And I know you may be thinking, well, I never want to work at that company anyway. That recruiter probably won't stay there their whole career. And they will remember you. And so if you want to work at the next company where they're working at, you don't have a chance. So just be polite and professional, because honestly, when you enter a career, you're going to have difficult conversations at some point or another. You may as well start having them now. If you want some wording about that, about how to decline in a polite and professional manner, feel free to reach out and I can help you out with that. So a job search question. I've got a few questions about sort of temping. I have this one. I use this one question in specific. I've heard good things about getting my career started with a temp agency. What do I need to know? and what are the pros and cons? Well, there is so many different pros. One is I've actually met a few people who have made a career out of temping. It's almost like, I don't know if you've ever met a teacher who they've made a career out of supply teaching, and they love it. They love it because, like the pay is decent. They have complete control over the work schedule. So if they need to not work a day, they can. It also has allowed them to travel, because if you sign up with one of the large temping agencies, the international ones, you can sort of travel and move around, and allows them to meet a lot of people. Some of the other pros is that there are specific industries where temping is a great way to get a foot in the door. So if you are in any sort of administrative type role or work within an administrative type department, so those departments would be things like finance, HR, then those are great departments and roles that you can start off temping. Some of the cons, though, is obviously if you are not in one of those. So if you're in IT, you're not going to temp. In sales, you're not going to temp. So it means that the con of temping is that it's very industry dependent. So some of the agencies that I have heard great things about in terms of using them is Manpower, Adecco, Randstad, Hayes, Torstaff, Altus HR, Robert Half. I will include the list of names there. So sort of the process of how you go through working with a temp agency is it is a little different. So for each one, some you go in and you sign up there. Some you sign up online. They will interview you, and they will probably have you do a number of assessments depending on the types of jobs you're looking at. And then you're sort of approved. So you're approved for the staffing list. Then when they have a job, a temp position pop up, they will look at their list, see who matches it, and give you a call to see if you want it. But when you go out for your first job, that is probably one of the most important ones, because that is your trial. If they will ask for performance reviews, and if you get good reviews, then you'll get more jobs. The great thing about this sort of temping is it actually leads to a lot of permanent jobs. So you start in a temp position maybe for 2 to 3 months, maybe gets extended till 6, or maybe it goes permanent right away. So it is a great way to get your foot in the door for admin roles, HR roles, some finance admin positions. But the one thing with temp agencies is you want to sign up for more than one. So a resume question. Should I put hobbies and interests on my resume? This depends on a wide number of factors. For example, how much experience you have. So if you are a new grad or a student, probably it would be nice to see some hobbies, because when recruiters are looking at co-op positions or entry-level positions or new grad positions, they are not just looking at your experience and your schooling, they are also looking to see who you are, like the breadth of interest that you have. So it's probably a good idea then. If you have 3 to 5 experience, it depends. 5 to 10, all of that, it depends on these sort of factors. Number 1, the role you are looking for. So if the role you are looking for is one where some sort of community contributions or hobbies would help you out, then I would definitely include it. If you are looking within a specific industry where hobbies and interests would be beneficial for you, then include it. So an example I always use is if you are looking for a career in the arts and culture industry, but you have no work experience, but one of your hobbies is you are a member of the ROM and the AGO and attend lots of galleries and attend lots of different arts and culture events, then that will definitely be useful for you to have your hobbies and interests on your resume. Okay. Next question. These next set of questions are about the interviews and an interview process. I have an interview with a tech startup next week. Toronto Businesses Organization. What do you mean about that, Dylan? For the industries, for the resume. So I had the question, should I put hobbies and interests on my resume? Toronto businesses where you would want that on, it does depend. I would say, the other thing, so that does bring me back. The other thing to note about hobbies and interests, if you happen to know who the hiring manager is, and you happen to know they have a unique hobby that you also have, like say you've both done the Ironman, or say you both like to knit or birdwatch, something that is not pretty typical, or you're both Star Trek lovers, that I would include that. Because then that sort of helps create a connection. First of all, it will get them more excited to meet with you. And then during an interview, it allows you to sort of build on that connection. So those interview questions. I have an interview with the tech startup next week, but I have no idea what to wear. Help. Well, not a suit. So I know the moniker is Dress for Success, and everyone assumes that means a suit. But a suit is not dressing for success in every type of environment. So it really does depend. So for, I would say, a bank, a suit would still work. But for a tech startup, most tech startups are very casual, not even business casual, very casual, where would not be uncommon to see people in sweats. So if you showed up in a suit, then they're going to think that you won't fit in. The other thing is tech startups their culture is a lot more relaxed, definitely a lot more modern and fluid and dynamic. And the suit, it gives off the impression of being very traditional, maybe boring in their sense and like in their eyes, and someone who perhaps is a little bit more tied to the traditional way things were done, which the tech startups are trying to break apart. So if you have an interview at a place like a tech startup, wearing something like a nice dark pair of jeans with a nice shirt, maybe a blazer, would be a good outfit. For guys, I would not recommend wearing a tie, and you still want to wear some nice shoes. And so whenever you're thinking about where you're interviewing and what you should wear, definitely keep in mind what type of environment they are. So the next one's a big question. 2 weeks ago, I had an interview. I prepared so much, had my questions to ask, all of my answers to questions prepared. But once I got in there, I crumbled. My nerves took over and I felt like I couldn't even string a sentence together. How can I avoid this happening again? I don't know about you, but this has definitely happened to me. And I'm sure this has happened to most of you out there because I have interviewed people where they are crumbling apart, and it's like painful to watch. And I have heard from clients about all the times that they have crumbled in interviews. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. First, I have a couple of articles, the 9 tips to get rid of your interview nerves, and to never ever do this in an interview. So in never ever do this in an interview or for an interview, I state practice, but not too much. So what I mean is that preparing too much is a thing, and it happens more often than you think. So what I mean by this is someone practices and they spend so much time on the interview, which increases the pressure and stress around that interview because it like explodes in importance in your mind. And when you get in there, your nerves are in overdrive, your excitement is in overdrive, your stress is in overdrive, and your brain just like is having none of it. It shuts down. And you can't think of anything. You can just see, like as an interviewer, you can see them trying to snap out of it, trying to find a way through it. As someone who's been there, I also know that feeling of like, you have the words, but you just cannot, make that connection to your mouth to have them come out in a proper way. I've also had it where all of a sudden, all my best stories just disappeared into thin air. So the stories that I'm giving are like lame and like really like very boring. Like anyone could have those stories. And all of that was from over-preparing. And I am an overthinker, overanalyzer, over-prepare. So that is my nature. And there are lots of people I meet who are the same. And I think that this individual is the same probably as well. So I'm a big believer in that foundational sort of interview prep. So that is where you are preparing for a family of jobs, where you have like an example of 3 to 5 different jobs that are sort of the same. And you are preparing your stories to cover off those requirements that they're looking for in those jobs, hard skills, soft skills. And that way, when an interview does pop up, you only need to review and make sure everything can be tailored to that specific company, and then also do your company research to prepare for the why do you want to work here. So the practice, but not too much, is a great way to avoid over preparing, so that when you get into an interview, you don't crumble. Now, for the other thing I like to recommend is prepare for the worst. So I'm a big thing on preparing for the worst. So let's assume that you follow that, but prepare for you going in there and falling apart, and prepare a way for you to get out of it. Because if you pre-prepare, if you have that in mind, so if I crumble, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. I'm going to calm myself down, take a sip of water, ask for a minute to think of an answer, and then I'm going to try my best to get past it. Okay? So by doing that, you are more likely, if you are to crumble again, to automatically take those 3 deep breaths, to take that sip of water, to ask for a minute and get on with it. You're more likely to be able to move past it from happening, so that maybe it messes up an interview question, but you're not messing up the entire interview. So other things you can do to sort of deal with nerves on a whole is, number 1, sleep. Having a good night's sleep allows you to handle any sort of stressors a little bit easier, including nerves. Move. So going for a walk before your interview, sort of getting out that nervous energy, using that up a little bit. Powering up. So this can be through the power pose, that like sort of Wonder Woman power pose that's been proven to help. Power songs, anything that really pumps you up and really gets you excited and gives you confidence. But also like faking it till you make it. Putting a smile on your face. Just knowing you got this, pretending that like these nerves, yes, they're there, but I can get past them. And the other thing to know is in our brains, nervous energy is the same as excitement. So which is a good and a bad thing. A bad thing because if you only think of excitement as nerves, your nerves grow. But if you start to think of some of those nerves as just excitement, then you can channel that energy to make you look like you're a very enthusiastic and excited individual for this position. Okay, so keeping that in mind, and that will hopefully help out with all of those nerves and anxiety surrounding the interview. And if you feel like crumbling in an interview has happened more than once, more than twice, and it's something you feel you just can't get past, looking at someone like myself or other career coaches, or going to an employment center to help get past that, I would highly recommend that perhaps it's time for you to think beyond just what you can do and see how you can get some help with it. So this is a follow-up question to a question I had last week. Last week, someone asked about quitting their job, and it really hit home. I've been really wanting to quit my job because I absolutely hate it, but I can't. I'm stuck here. Any tips? Okay, so I have a blog post that I wrote, or an article, How to Love the Job You Hate. And in it, I talk about a time, I get very personal, and talk about a time where I was really unhappy in my job. And unfortunately, was not doing the things I should have been doing. I allowed myself to isolate, to wallow, to just generally be unhappy. And it had an impact on my overall well-being and my overall happiness. It had an impact on my productivity. And it probably wasn't at the best time because it also all happened around the time of the recession. And it did lead to me being laid off with a lot of the people in my company, actually. Recruitment was hit hard. But I understood why I got laid off, because, I probably wasn't doing the best job I could have done. And the thing is I wasn't really looking for a job at that time. But even if I was, because of I was afraid, ironically, I wasn't looking for a job because I was afraid I was going to get laid off. And that happened anyway. You can't plan for things like that. But if I was looking for a job, I don't think I would have gotten hired because I was not in the right mind space. Like I would not have been able to sell myself properly or engage properly because I had been isolating myself. So know that you are not alone in hating your job, especially because more than 50% of employees in North America are unhappy with their jobs. So probably the person sitting beside you, definitely at least half of the people around you are unhappy. So know that you're not alone. So there are 5 things though you can do to start loving your job so that you can move on from your job. So when I talk about how to love the job you hate, I'm not talking about how you should just stay. I'm talking about how you can be the best employee you can be in the most positive mindset you can be. I know I've talked about the positive mindset before, so that you are more successful in securing that role that will make you happy, that you will actually love, that you don't have to work at loving all the time. It's always a little bit of work. So there's 5 things you can do. Number 1 is take back control. So there's a lot of things that you probably hate about your job that you can't change, that are really outside of the realm of your control. But there's probably some things that are within your control. So anything that is within your control, find ways to change it to suit you. Okay? And that's the next part too, is the change it up. Is there anything that you want to be doing but that your job responsibilities don't include? If there is, make a meeting with your manager. Talk about your growth and development, and talk about how you would appreciate more responsibility in such and such. And by getting that responsibility, number 1, it's good for your resume, so that doesn't hurt. But also it gives you an opportunity to be doing the things that you want to be doing. If they say no, which can happen, then you can see if there's other ways that you can incorporate it. Maybe talking to other teammates or something. Be friendly. So I know with me, I really isolated myself when I was not liking my job. I was pretty much, there's a few things. I was pretty much only talking to people who also hated their job. So we would have like bitch fest where we would go and we would talk about all the things we hate, and the toxic and negative energy would just, mushroom. So I don't necessarily mean I want you to be hanging out with them. It's okay to vent, but once you pass that line from venting into like just wallowing, that is when the negative energy seeps out. So it's okay to find people to vent. But otherwise, if 50% are unhappy, more than 50% are unhappy, that means there's probably about 50% that are happy. Seek those people out. Become friends with people who like their jobs. Talk about good, positive things, and that will help you be a little bit more engaged. It'll help you if you're interviewing or networking, because you'll have that sort of positive mindset that I know I talk about a lot all the time. Be thankful. So a gratitude practice. And this is a gratitude practice specific to the job that you hate. So if you hate your boss, yes. Number one reason why people leave their job, because they hate their boss or they hate the people they're working with. So probably a lot of you have hated or hate your boss. But instead of thinking about all the ways that they either hold you back or that they suck or that they micromanage and control every aspect, start coming up with 1 or 2 things per day that they have given to you, that they have allowed you to progress in your career, good things about them, even if sometimes if it's just little things like, oh, they always say good morning. Like, start thinking of your boss and the team around you in a more positive light. And again, this is for you for now, but it's also when you get into an interview and they start asking you questions about that sort of stuff. If you are only thinking negatively about your manager, it's going to be very difficult for that not to come into an interview. And hiring managers do not want to hire someone who hates their manager so outwardly, because they don't want you to be out there complaining, bad-mouthing, insulting them to other people. So by having that sort of thankfulness about your boss and our manager and doing that gratitude practice will allow you to go into an interview and talk positively about your experience working for them. And that's same with a company. So think about if it's a company that's really sort of their values, the way they run business, which I know with things changing, some people feel that way about a lot of companies, then just be thankful and have gratitude for the things that they have provided you. Maybe they have a good benefit plan, or maybe they have a good work from home policy, or maybe you have a really nice looking office, or they have a great coffee, like anything and anything that will allow you to be more positive about it and to talk in a good light about previous employees during interviews. And then lastly, the smile. It again kind of goes back to the interview nerves, the faking it until you make it. So if you just pretend that you like your job. Have you ever had those conversations with individuals and they're just, those people that are constantly nitpicking or offering suggestions or and you just sort of got to sit through it. And so you just smile and nod. And then eventually it kind of takes the sting, or it allows you to just it allows it to sort of roll off your back a little bit. That's kind of how I want you to do it, is if you go in every day with a smile on your face, this is going to be a good day. I'm going to be thankful for working here. I'm going to try and control the aspects of my job that I can control, try and include work that I really want to be working with, and talk with people who won't bring me down, then eventually it will get better. And you will start to like your job, if not love your job a little bit more, while you look for that dream career. So that is all the questions I have, 8 questions for the week. Let me go through a little bit of what they were. We had 3 questions on the offer process. So if you're in an offer process or interview process with a company and you have a vacation coming up, what to do, a little bit more information about the references and background and employment verification, what to do if you get an offer that you don't want to take, or you're interviewing for a company that you don't really want to keep interviewing for. I am going to say the number 1 lesson that I talked about, if you don't go back, is don't ghost. Please do not ghost. The job search questions about temp agencies and the pros and cons and what to work on. A resume question about putting hobbies and interests on the resume. What to wear to an interview with a tech startup. How to handle interview nerves, or what happens if I crumbled in an interview. And then how to love a job you hate when you can't quit it. Like usual, I am going to post all the links below and any information that I have included. I will also post all of this as a little catch up in my newsletter I do, but also on my website, www.sarahcurto.ca/career coach blog. And I keep sort of all of those together so that it's just sort of easy peasy. Everyone can find things and can reference back to some of the questions and some of the bullet points for ideas. In the meantime, if you have any questions that you want me to address next week, please you can either comment them below, you can post them on my page, you can email me, message me, you can many different ways that questions have come through. I look forward to answering them and helping out in any way that I can. Until next week. Bye, everyone.